Welcome back, everyone. Next is a public hearing on expedited bill 1421, Finance, Working Families Income Supplement Amendments. This bill would alter certain requirements for residents to qualify for Working Families Income Supplement and generally amend the law governing the Working Families Income Supplement tax credit. A GO committee work session will be scheduled at a later date. Persons wishing to submit additional material for the council's consideration should do so before the close of business on May 18th. If you would like to follow the progress of a council bill, the council website has a subscribe function. You can go there and use the View Council Records and Legislative Updates link to learn how. Each individual will have 2 minutes to speak. Individuals will be alerted as they approach their 2 minutes and may be disconnected. And of course, there may be technical glitches. Ms. Kennedy, can you please call on the speaker?
Yes, I can. Good afternoon. We do have several speakers this afternoon, and Miss Diana Lavoie is on the line with us today to provide translation if needed. Our first testimony will come from Michael Kovayu. Mr. Kovayu, you have 2 minutes. You may begin when you're ready.
Yes, hello. Thank you, President Hucker and Vice President Albornoz and council members. For the record, I'm Mike Kovayu, the Director of Finance. It's my pleasure to appear before you speaking on behalf of County Executive Elrich in favor of this bill. And the County Executive thanks you for taking it up in such a timely manner. I will quickly go through the testimony and just hit some high points. The Maryland General Assembly passed Senate Bill 218 on March 5th of this year, allowing residents with ITINs, that's individual taxpayer identification numbers, to be eligible for the state earned income credit for the very first time. This legislation essentially uses that as an opportunity to expand the Working Families Income Supplement, which is the county's version of the earned income credit, to the same filers, thereby significantly expanding the reach of this program. I would say that this expansion of the Working Families Income Supplement, or WFIS, would be the largest since WFIS's inception, though it is currently only a temporary increase. The state program is only a 3-year program. You've probably seen the economic and fiscal impact statements already. We estimate so far the fiscal impact of this bill to be about $15 million per year for the next 3 years, possibly 15 million. It could be more than that. It could be less than that. That is explained in a supplemental budget appropriation that was sent to council a week or two ago. I think it will be before you, before the GO committee or before council tomorrow, actually. Very briefly, the Working Families Income Supplement program is one of the most successful anti-poverty tools that the county possesses. And expanding the program to immigrants recognizes the contribution that they make to our society, provides stability for those who are among our most vulnerable neighbors. Again, on behalf of County Executive Elrich, I thank you for considering our thoughts and the testimony, which is a little bit more wordy than my speechifying right now. And we do request that you pass Bill 14-21. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kovayu. The next testimony will come from Tiffany Jones. Ms. Jones, you also have 2 minutes and you may begin when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Council President Hucker, Vice President Albornoz, and members of the County Council. My name is Tiffany Jones, and I'm the chair of the Montgomery County Community Action Board. And thank you for this opportunity to speak with you on behalf of our board in strong support of Council Bill 1421. Extensive research indicates that the EITC is one of the best tools available to not only lift people out of poverty, but also reduce health disparities and improve educational outcomes for children. This year, the CAB supported the expansion of the Maryland EITC this year, which raised the state match to 45% of the federal EITC, increased the EITC for single adults, and for the first time included rather than excluded people who filed taxes with an ITIN. This expansion is estimated to impact 45,000 county residents filing tax returns, including dependents. 21,000 county filers without dependents, and 5,300 I-10 filers in the county. Passage of this bill would allow more community members to benefit from a proven anti-poverty tool. We strongly recommend funding to support a 100% match for the Working Families Income Supplement. EITC expansions have been linked to increased birth weights with larger impacts for births to African American women to improve maternal health and to decreases in children entering foster care. The EITC is also a racial equity tool, as research has shown its greater impact on reducing poverty for households of color. This year, it's important to assure that county residents are aware of these credits, as 1 in 3 households are typically new filers. EITC recipients also must have access to tax services that will connect them with all of the credits for which they're eligible. The Community Action Agency coordinates the county's multilingual EITC outreach campaign. It's the largest county VITA program and is Maryland's largest VITA program preparing taxes for taxpayers with I-10. Free tax help has decreased by at least 80%, according to our colleagues at the Cash Campaign of Maryland, due to the complexity of delivering virtual services during COVID.
Pardon me, Ms. Jones, I'm sorry, your time is up, but thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Amy Wakehoff. Ms. Wakehoff, you have 2 minutes as well. You may begin when you're ready.
Hi. It wasn't letting me. Okay, there we go. My name is Amy Wyckoff, and I have lived in Montgomery County for over 33 years. I'm speaking in opposition to Bill 1421, Finance Working Families Income Supplement Amendments, which will extend the Working Families Income Supplement to taxpayers with an ITIN instead of a Social Security number. One category of ITIN holders are illegal aliens who, as the name implies, are in the country unlawfully. This bill will affect up to 68,000 residents of the county. In addition, it will cost the county an estimated $15 million annually for each of the next 3 years. If we provide these tax credits to illegal aliens, we will incentivize more people to come into Montgomery County illegally. And at what cost? The annual $15 million will come from the county's taxpayers, which include many suffering economically because of the pandemic. Laying out the welcome mat for more illegal aliens puts a strain on our schools, who must not only pay for each new student, but must pay an extra 50% because the new students are enrolled in ESOL classes. Other county departments provide an array of social services to illegal aliens already in the county. Finally, increasing the number of illegal aliens means there are fewer jobs available to citizens of the county. Providing these benefits to those here illegally is a slap in the face of those immigrants who spent years and their own funds to come here legally. I therefore urge you to vote against Bill 1421. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Eunice Morales. Ms. Morales, you have 2 minutes for your testimony, and you may begin when you're ready.
Señorita Morales, yo estoy dispuesta a interpretar si usted desea. I am ready to interpret if you would like interpretation.
Sí, hablaré en español.
Okay, yes, I will speak in Spanish.
Gracias. Buenas tardes, señores miembros del Consejo. Quiero primeramente agradecer lo mucho que hacen por nuestra comunidad, en especial mi comunidad latina.
Good afternoon, members of the council. I'd like to thank you first for all that you do for our community, especially for my Latin American community.
Mi nombre es Eunice Morales. Soy madre de 4 ciudadanos americanos y participante del proyecto Latino Cívico, o Cívico Latino, perdón.
My name is Eunice Morales. I'm the mother of 4 American citizens, and I'm a participant in the Cívico Latino project.
Quiero agradecer la oportunidad de testificar ante ustedes y dar mi testimonio de cómo impactaría nuestra comunidad, la Ley 1421, que es el suplemento de ingreso para las familias trabajadoras.
I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to testify before you and to give my testimony about how the bill 1421 would impact our community. This is the bill that is the income supplement for working families.
Desde que llegué al condado de Montgomery, he presentado mis declaraciones de impuestos utilizando el ITIN y desafortunadamente he perdido muchos créditos por esta situación.
Ever since I got to Montgomery County, I have been reporting my taxes using the ITIN number, and unfortunately, I've lost, as a result, the opportunity for many credits as a result of that situation.
En estos momentos y a causa de la pandemia, muchas de nuestras familias han sido muy afectadas en el área laboral y algunos les disminuyeron las horas de trabajo y algunos otros simplemente se quedaron sin empleo.
At this time, and because of the pandemic, many of our families have been very affected in terms of work. Some have had their hours cut back, and others have simply been left without work.
Considero que esta propuesta de ley, cuando sea aprobada, traerá muchos beneficios a las familias, al igual que a mi familia. Esta ley motivará a las familias a dedicarse con mejor esmero a sus trabajos para obtener mejores remuneraciones y a pagar con gusto sus impuestos, sabiendo que así estarán obteniendo sus créditos y haciendo que todos en nuestro condado estemos en mejores condiciones.
Well, I think, excuse me, I think that this bill, once it is approved, will bring a lot of benefits to the families as well, to our families, as well as specifically to my family. This law will motivate families to dedicate ourselves even more assiduously to our work, to earn better pay, and we will be happy to pay our taxes, to obtain better earnings and to pay our taxes, and thereby to receive the credits, making it possible for all of us in Montgomery County to be in better conditions.
Agradecida por su atención, reciba muchas bendiciones. Buenas tardes.
I thank you for your attention. Bless you and good afternoon.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, I don't see our last speaker on the line, so that wraps up the speakers for this public hearing.
Terrific, Ms. Kennedy, and thank you to all our speakers. And Ms. Lavoy. Next, we will interview Ms. Simpson for her reappointment to the Montgomery County Planning.
Mr. President, your Wi-Fi is going in and out, so we're catching every other word.
Right.
Maybe it was too ambitious. Ms. Patterson, so nice to see you.
Good afternoon, Council President. Good afternoon, Vice President. It's a pleasure to be here. Whoever selected this date, this is most auspicious for me because exactly 4 years ago you interviewed me. So it's good to see you. It's good to be back. And I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you so much, Ms. Patterson. We're so glad to have you back. Please tell us why you'd like to continue serving on the Planning Board.
Thank you. The reasons I'd like to continue serving on the Planning Board are very much the same as they were 4 years ago. We need representation both in Up County, but I bring to the Planning Board the experience of being a commuter, using public transportation only. I'm currently a small business owner. I've been unemployed in Montgomery County, and I know what it's like to seek housing and try to find affordable housing. So having those perspectives, but also being a dispute resolution resolver, gives me a unique perspective as well as a way of interacting with both the public and staff to help move projects forward. So those are the reasons I would like to stay on the Planning Board. I'd like to continue the work that I've begun.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What have been the most challenging issues considered by the Planning Board during your tenure?
Oh, goodness. Oh, well, let me start with one that's near and dear to me, and that is maintaining the cybersecurity, information technology, and data privacy structure of the both the Planning Board as well as the Commission. And most jurisdictions throughout the United States have succumbed to either some type of hack, threat, or in some instances, ransomware. That continues to be a challenge for both the Planning Board as well as the Commission. Because of the work that I have been involved in professionally, and because I'm a recent graduate of the Citizens Academy, FBI Citizens Academy, I have worked to make connections and introductions so that we can look at both strengthening as well as identifying and mitigating and neutralizing cybersecurity and information technology data breaches. The other two areas that I consider challenges have to do with subdivision of existing parcels of land. We frequently see these are probably the most contentious. And part of it is because land historically and continues to be a symbol of power. What is probably the most challenging is some of the comments that are submitted. And I think specifically about a religious organization that wanted to establish roots in Clarksburg specifically. And some of the letters that we received from the community were just downright heartbreaking. Accusations, misinformation, disinformation. The project moved forward, but I also told the organization to work with our Interfaith Advisory Council because there's no reason in this county that no one should feel welcome. The third area for me is related to water sewer connections. Again, the water, access to water, who has it and what is done with it is a symbol of power. So these again tend to be very emotional discussions. People want the sewer connection and sometimes the outcome is not what they want, but we hope that they will, if advice is given to them to make connections or corrections to their application, that they'll go ahead and do so.
Thank you. What do you consider your greatest accomplishments as a member of the board?
This one's multifold. I'd say my greatest accomplishment, I'll start with parks because I have championed their enterprise asset management system, the acquisition of it. And part of it was because I strongly believe in improved system delivery, and parks at the end of the day services the county, services the community. And what this enterprise asset management application does is it allows us to get a better sense of the resources needed to mow the lawn, to make sure that picnic tables are in place. But it also gives us a better sense of when we are putting together an operating budget, what's really needed, and can we regroup, reprioritize, or better position what we're requesting. So I like it. I think it's worked well. Most of the staff has been trained on it. The enterprise application. The specific plans and parks that I feel that are my greatest accomplishments, I'll start first with the MARC Rail, the MARC Rail plan that impacted specifically Germantown. This was one of the first opportunities that I had to interface with the residents of Boyd and a charrette. They wanted me to participate, but that's not how it works. So I observed, listened to what the participants had to say. They had some great ideas that were later presented to the planning board, and I believe that they were also presented to you. Both for the Germantown MARC Rail plan as well as the Veers Mill plan, I feel that I was very successful in making sure that the interests of businesses, not only retaining, but making sure that businesses have an opportunity to grow in those communities, was at the forefront of both of those plans, so that as we grow, we don't push out the existing businesses that we have in place. And then last but not least, I have been intentional and deliberate in asking the planning department to be intentional and deliberate in its approach to identifying the inventory of historical burial sites as well as funerary objects, so that it's who we're looking at is more inclusive. And I specifically brought out in the last discussion that we also need to recognize that Native American people were on this land before anyone else, and that the funerary objects as well as the burial sites should be recognized.
Terrific. How do you position the board to work on racial equity and social justice issues?
Oh, that's okay. So that one's near and dear to my heart. I think most of you know I previously served on the county's Human Rights Commission, but let me talk a little bit about what I've been doing in the past 4 years. I have served as and continue to serve as an advisor to the Commission's Diversity Council. When the Diversity Council wanted to expand its mission and focus areas, I advised the council to look at, and I provided them copies of one of the best practice areas in the commercial sector, which is Coca-Cola. And I also pointed them to the work that's been done by the National Institutes of Health. I'm pleased to say that the council has indeed modified its mission and expanded its focus areas to look more closely at racial and social justice issues. Most recently, I was selected. I'm one of 15 public leaders nationally to participate in the Public Leaders for Inclusion Council, the 2021 cohort. And the focus of this cohort is to make sure that communities as well as public leaders are aware of how to address Islamophobia. This is a good dovetail for me because it really meshes with the work that I had started when I was on the Human Rights Commission and looking at the countering violent extremism. But this work really looks at how do we make sure that our brothers and sisters who identify as Muslim feel welcome here and are able to participate in parks and planning activities. One of the things that we frequently see is that people are not coming out, and it's because they're afraid to. Most recently, I'm in the process, and as of next week, I will be able to say I'm a graduate. I've been working on a master's degree program in dispute resolution. And as part of that master's program, I have spent the past 9 months working with a land use agency on the West Coast to help them develop their diversity, equity, inclusion plan. And that plan not only looks at their work plan, which is mostly regulatory, but it also looks at their management plan and how can everything that they do be done with an application of a diversity, equity, inclusion lens, meaning that whether it's climate change that they're discussing or who has access to the parks, how can it be done with a diversity, equity, inclusion lens? It's been great work. I know that they're excited. I'm excited about what they're about to launch. And last but certainly not least, in 2019, I had the privilege and I'm still involved with the county's Remembrance and Reconciliation Commission. And again, this is recognizing the African-American men in this county who were lynched and bringing to bear to the public's attention this form of racial terror.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And are there any potential conflicts of interest of which we should be aware?
No, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Patterson. Okay, first question goes to Councilmember Novato.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And not so much a question, but just taking this opportunity to thank you, Ms. Patterson, for your service. It has been noticeable that you have definitely made extraordinary contributions to the planning board and to our county. And I think that we are very fortunate that you have decided to step up again. And as you said, a very auspicious day, because it's amazing that it was, wow, time just flies, but it's definitely auspicious. But really wanted to thank you, and especially when it comes to your work on racial equity and social justice. So many people, including yourself, have been working on these issues for a very long time. And I think it is just wonderful that everything has come together in a systemic way, I think, in a structural way, to then help us be able to move the needle on so many of these issues throughout all of our policy areas and throughout all of the facets of life in the county. And, you know, you there being a pioneer have definitely made a mark and with the planning board, and it shows in many of the master plans and many of the activities that the planning board has taken up. So I appreciate that particular contribution as well. And I look forward to supporting you for another term.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much. And, you know, it's funny, Council President Hucker and I were just talking about a little over 4 years ago when we were talking about your nomination and making sure that the support was there. And oh, what a great 4 years it has been, because all of the things that when you and I first discussed your potential candidacy and what you wanted to accomplish and what you were bringing to the table has come to fruition. And that says a lot, because a lot of people talk a lot of big things and don't always necessarily deliver. But you have come well beyond all of the things, because you made a point, and I remember in the interview, you were talking about how you were going to approach this differently from what we typically see from planning board members. And you've done that. You've really attached yourself to a number of things that continue to lift up the planning board and move the planning board in great directions that people don't oftentimes talk about, that are still absolutely important to the overall efficacy of the board itself and your overall mission. And that is something that needs to be lauded and lifted up. and is a reason why I continue to support you in this effort. I think that you have been a great new voice for the planning board, and one in which it's not just what people would have assumed is I'm going to fight for everything that's up county and make sure that all things that were left out from the up county happen. Not to say that you're not focused on those, but there's so many other things that are out there that you also do. And that's what really is important. And that's what being a good planning board member is about. Understanding how to contribute to make the organization better for those folks that are participating in the process, to make it better in terms of communication, to make it more effective when it comes to its operation, all of those kinds of things. And that's not oftentimes what we hear. And so I'm just really, really happy to see you continuing to re-up for another 4 years so we can benefit from your great leadership once again on the planning board. So thank you very much, Mrs. Patterson.
Thank you, Councilmember Rice.
Thank you both. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's good to see you, Ms. Patterson. I realized I didn't have my jacket on. I turned my camera off to go get my jacket because it's your anniversary day today. Happy anniversary. And just to follow the comments of my colleagues, I've really appreciated, as a first-term council member, heading, getting ready to close out the third year here. I've spoken to you probably the most. As far as a lot of it has been initiated by you, and I really appreciate that. And we see Mr. Anderson; it's his job to be before us, so we've probably spoken to him more because he's always here. But you have proactively reached out, and I just want to thank you publicly for that because it's helped me realize the engagement and the interaction and the conversation, particularly as a member of the Fed Committee, is really important with our planning board colleagues and staff. As well as parks. And so you've done a great job. You bring a very unique and important perspective. You've always been very pragmatic, very honest and forthright with your views. And I think to Councilmember Rice's point, not only, even though you represent you're from the up county perspective, you take into account the whole county. You're obviously the only African-American on the board. That's an important position. So there's a lot of really, really important roles that you play. And so I'm really excited. I was excited to hear when you called and said you were running for reappointment, wanted to be reappointed rather. And I'm really happy that this is going to happen. You obviously have my support. It sounds like you're going to have the support of all of our colleagues, which is a great thing. So thank you for your continued work and looking forward to continuing to partner with you to improve our county for all of our residents.
Thank you, Councilmember Jawando. I just have one question for you. If I had told you it was my birthday, would you have worn a hat as well? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. My birthday
Nope.
passed a couple of days ago, so we're good.
Happy belated birthday.
Happy belated birthday.
Oh,
Councilmember
thank
Whitmore.
you.
Did you say my name?
I did. Councilmember Ring.
You went out, cut out a little bit there. Thank you. Really appreciate, Ms. Patterson, your work on the board, and glad you're applying to be reappointed. You've been part of really some terrific innovations. Just really a big fan of the team, and I know you're a leader there. So, the first master plan we took up in this council term was the Veers Mill corridor. I thought that was really a home run. The work you're doing on the 270 corridors plan, and we did White Flint 2, and you just sent us Thrive 2050. So you've been really immersed in some of the bigger challenges in planning, and really appreciate the great work you're doing. So thank you for being willing to continue doing. I know it's hard work, it takes a lot of hours, and you have to accept, at times a lot of criticism from the community. So appreciate your being willing to put yourself out there and being part of our process. So thank you so much, Ms. Patterson. Really look forward to working with you going forward.
Thank you, Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you, Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ms. Patterson, it's good to see you. I am really glad that you are here today because I always appreciate our conversations. And what I appreciate most about our interactions are your thoughtful, personable style. right? We can be real and have good conversations. And the decision making also that you've made from your role is definitely holistic, and it's something that I appreciate and we all appreciate here, trying to look out for the betterment of the entire county, as large and diverse as it is. And so I'm gonna ask you a question, and it is about the large county, and we're waiting for census data that'll be coming out, with census tract information, just about all the population growth. And so we know clearly population has changed in the 4 years since you've been here, changed tremendously over the last decade. And I'm, in your comments, you had said that, land is a valued commodity. Absolutely. And so I'm just curious, in this holistic style of work, when we see this data, when we see the census data and all the population changes, what do you think that should, how should that be taken into account? What does that mean for us moving forward, going from 1.1 million people to however many more the census will tell us, and then those in the years ahead?
That's a great question. Thank you, Councilmember Glass. As a matter of fact, this week we are getting our initial presentation regarding the census data. I personally have a few concerns regarding the census data, and it's primarily because of the way in which the census was closed down. I honestly believe that there are some individuals that may have not had an opportunity to participate in the census. Historically, people have not participated because they didn't want to. This time, I think people have been left out for other reasons, and part of it is just the timing. But specifically, as it relates to your question, I do think it will mean that we will take a closer look. I'm anticipating, and don't hold me to this, I'm anticipating that we will see that we continue to have growth in the two largest groups, and that is those 55 and older and those between the ages of 0 and 5. And so what that means to me is that we will need to look at future planning in terms of our roads infrastructure, but also housing. But also, what will we do as a county to attract jobs? It's one of the areas that I don't think we have really been successful in forming a linkage and looking at. Not only do we need more housing, and we need attainable and affordable housing, but also how do we make it possible for potential businesses, and it doesn't have to be a multi-billion-dollar business, but for a business to come to this county and stay in this county. It is human nature that people like to live near where they work. So I think it's going to be multifold. I think our outreach will continue to become more expansive so that we are multilingual in our approach. I know people dodge this, but the term that I use is new majority. And I think we'll see that Montgomery County has become a new majority county. And what does that mean? What does that mean in terms of the services that we offer? Public transportation continues to be a sticking point. And while we don't have, as the planning board, don't have purview over what happens regarding public transportation, I think it will mean that we'll need to be more thoughtful and intentional when we make recommendations regarding removal of bus stops, and asking when a development comes before us, what is available in terms of sidewalks, what's available in terms of pedestrian traffic. Knowing that we have an aging community, we also need to think about what does that mean in terms of being able to cross the street. And I have talked with MCDOT many times about extending the period of time that it takes to cross the street. There is a gentleman by the name of Guy Penaloso who uses what he calls the 880 rule. The traffic to cross the street should be accounted for whether you're 8 years old or 80 years old. And sometimes we just don't have the infrastructure in place currently, but it can be modified. The lighting can be changed. So those are the things that first come to mind. I think that we'll see this expand even more. Most interestingly, 4 years ago, millennials were still primarily living in apartments. And as predicted, millennials are now starting to look at their starter homes. And so that's also going to be part of the conversation as well.
Well, I praised you for your holistic vision, and you certainly lived up to that in your response. And so I appreciate the thoughtfulness again that you shared with us, and look forward over the next 4 years to work with you to improve all of those things that you just talked about. So thank you again for wanting to stay in this position. I look forward to supporting you.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you both. Ms. Patterson, please feel free to loop me in when you're in touch with DOT about matters like that. Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And Ms. Patterson, as always, it is good to see you. I did like your comment about the hat and the coat to Councilmember Jawando. I thought that was fun, and I always appreciate a little liveliness at a meeting, as you know. I'm just here to say candidly, first of all, it is hard to believe it's 4 years, but beyond that, you came with a wealth of knowledge. You did. And you were someone that took that wealth and invested it wisely for Montgomery County and have had great growth with it as well. You have, I know, have learned. I know you have taught. I know that you have shown the great concern for the people of Montgomery County and your role. And I just want to join the chorus and say thank you. And I look forward to voting for you. Tina, the best of luck. As always, I know we will chat. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you. I was going to say, first of all, happy anniversary. Second of all, I will remember to wear a hat for your birthday next year. I made a mental note of that. I just wanted to echo some of the comments of colleagues. Thank you in particular for your advocacy for parks and to make sure that the park system is as activated and accessible for as many residents in our community as possible. We've really seen a change to the way that we utilize the 37,000 acres of parkland, the 424 parks. I know that your voice has been a critical part of that, and the parks team has really followed through on that. So I just wanted to express my gratitude and appreciation on behalf of the whole county on that front, and also your candor and your continued push on economic development and ensuring that the Park and Planning Commission is part of our economic development efforts to reach our full goals, to be able to provide the type of revenues that we need, the type of quality of life that we all want and expect. So I just wanted to thank you for those two aspects. Look forward to approving your continuation to your service, and appreciate your using your skills and your talent to serve the community that we all care so deeply about. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Friedson. And thank you, Councilmember Katz.
Thank you. Council Vice President Albornoz.
Thank you. Just going to bring up the rear here. Ms. Patterson, thank you for your really outstanding leadership on so many different levels. We appreciate your service on the board. Obviously, look forward to having you serve an additional 4 years. And as we all know, the county is particularly at a crossroads as we look at the general plan, and there's a great difference of opinion depending on where you live on the need for the rate of growth, or some feel that we're growing too fast. And finding that sweet spot is always a challenge, but one that I have a great deal of respect in the synergy of the work between the planning board and the council to do our best and try and achieve to pursue the common good. And so your perspective and professional and personal experiences are incredibly valuable to this body. And I too, along with all of my colleagues, look forward to working with you over these next 4 years. So thank you and keep up the great work.
Thank you, Vice President.
Well, Ms. Patterson, everything's been said, but not everybody's had a chance to say it. So let me just say I too can't believe it's 4 years, but I am so pleased and relieved that you're willing to serve again. I know it's not easy, and as Hans said, you never make everyone happy. But I believe 4 years ago that your background, your values, your service on the Human Rights Commission, your professional training and dispute resolution would really be a powerful asset on the planning board. And I think we were all right when we voted you in there. And I think you've made a big difference there. As I said, I'm relieved that you're willing to put yourself through another 4 years, but our county is going to be much better off for it. So thanks for everything you're doing there, and stay in close touch with us. And I bet you can guess where we're going with this, but I'm required to tell you, we'll let you know the council decision later this week.
Very good. Thank you, Council President. And thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Now we will sit for the district council. We have a recommendation from the Fed committee. Let me call on Chairman Reamer.
Sorry, let me pull that up. I apologize.
No worries.
All right. Okay, we are taking up a zoning text amendment that I think is most helpful to think about from a 30,000 foot level here. Because if you get too far into the trees, you really will miss the forest. The basic issue that this ZTA is addressing, and this ZTA was recommended to us, drafted by and sent to us by the planning board. The basic issue is that we have a certain part of the zoning code that seeks to allow housing for continuing care communities, senior living communities where services are provided with the housing type. And it's a really critical type of housing for our community to have and for any community to have. And the zoning code today contemplates large buildings basically for that type of structure. Think about the big structures inside of Leisure World, for example, but doesn't contemplate as much small developments that might use, single unit housing or duplexes, something small, like other parts of Leisure World, if you think about it, some of those that are more neighborhoody. I should say, well, whatever. So we're trying to fix that. And the zoning code that we've recommended to you, the amendment, would basically allow for a more diverse array of housing types to attain the status of senior care, continuing care. Now, there are a lot of things that go with that that are really not part of the zoning code per se. But the core issue is, should we allow for the kinds of housing types that are contemplated in this zoning text amendment to fit wherever this type of housing would be allowed? There is a particular development that has been a source of some community controversy, and as I said at the Fed committee, and I'll say it again, this zoning text amendment does not approve or reject that proposal. That is a proposal that is before the Board of Zoning Appeals, and it will have its, the decision will be made there, and residents who don't want to see that happen or do want to see that happen will need to take their case to that body. But we're here to discuss whether there is indeed a missing, the zoning code needs to evolve and contemplate the changing housing types that might want to be used in this way. And the Fed committee recommended favorably in that regard. So I'll turn it to Ms. Livoon and Ju and ask her to present this to us and take us through the committee recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Reamer. So this CTA was first introduced in December 2020. And as Councilmember Reamer said, is to provide seniors with more flexibility in their housing options by allowing smaller scale housing instead of just multi-unit building structures. And this would still require assisted living services be available, and it would still be under all the conditional use standards. And so there's a few amendments that were recommended by the Fed committee, which heard this on April 19th. So the first thing is it's going to add a definition for senior care community that provides for buildings of any structure type. And that definition is a community providing a continuum of residential occupancy and healthcare services for seniors. This community must include assisted living and residential independent dwelling units, and may also include memory care and/or skilled nursing in one or more buildings of any structure type. The healthcare and services component of the community may be located in a structure physically separated from the independent dwelling units. So that is the first thing in the ZTA. The second is continuing care retirement community is a term that was in the zoning ordinance, but it has never actually been defined. So there is actually a definition under state law. So what the CTA would do, based on the amendments recommended by the Fed committee, is it would make that definition a type of residential care facility structured in a manner consistent with the annotated code of Maryland. So anybody who is applying to build one of these communities doesn't have two different definitions. It's the same definition that the state has. The third thing in the ZTA is there be a minimum side setback of 20 feet to abutting lots not included in the application. The reason for this is so that there's sort of compatibility in the neighborhoods where these are being built, since what was envisioned is this campus style community with the different building types. This would make sure that there's still 20 feet on the side of those major developments to sort of provide a buffer zone for neighboring properties. And then because there are going to be multiple types of buildings, setbacks are required for each of those different building types. The recommended zone is the R30 zone because it already has a lot of reasonable setbacks for different building types. And then the senior care community would have the same age restrictions as a continuing care retirement community. I believe that's 62 years of age or older. And also a continuing care retirement community would also be listed. So both of those, senior care community and a continuing care retirement community, would all fit under that definition of a residential care facility.
Thank you very much, Nabu. So, Mr. Council President, you have committee recommendation. Turn it back to you.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't see any request to speak, so we have a committee recommendation from the Fed committee. Without any requests, all those in favor, please raise your hand.
This is a roll
Oh,
call,
I'm sorry, it's
Mr.
roll
Chair.
call, of course, sorry. Madam Clerk, do you mind calling the roll, please?
Mr. Glass,
Yes.
Mr. Glass votes yes. Mr. Tawando,
Yes.
Mr. Tawando votes yes. Mr. Reamer,
Yes.
Mr. Reamer votes yes. Mr. Katz,
Yes.
Mr. Katz votes yes. Ms. Navarro, Ms. Navarro votes yes. Mr. Rice,
Yes.
Mr. Rice votes yes. Mr. Friedson,
Yes.
Mr. Friedson votes yes. Mr. Albornoz,
Yes.
Mr. Albornoz votes yes. Mr. Hucker,
Yes,
Mr. Hucker votes yes.
terrific. The ZTA passes. Thank you. Next is Councilmember Katz.
Yeah, I just think it should not go without being noticed that Councilmember Reamer made a statement that I actually wrote down. It says, before we get too far into the trees, because if we do, we might miss the forest. I don't know what that means, but that is a great statement. I just want you to know. So anyhow, thanks.
Appreciate that. Thank you. We'll do some forest bathing sometime together.
Yeah,
Talk about it.
somehow that could be something on a plaque somewhere, somehow. Yeah.
Don't post the pictures. Okay, now I'll call on Marlene Michelson, the council's executive director, for an update on the budget.
Thank you, Mr. President. As you know, the committees finished their work on the budget on Friday and the council has begun its work. So this is just a check-in for you to provide a summary of where the committees ended up. First, I just want to start with a reminder of the schedule. The council will be meeting all this week and next week through Thursday, when you will be taking straw votes on the budget. So only a few more days of work sessions and you'll be wrapping up your work. So straw votes will happen on next Thursday, May 20th, and then final council action will be 1 week later on May 27th. So just in terms of where the committees ended up, per the council president's directions on the budget, the committees were able to add additions into one of three categories. Category 1 was for funding available through the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, which will be considered after approval of the budget, with the exception of those specifically identified as part of the FY22 budget. And we'll have more of that in a minute. The second category was for things that should be added to the base budget and would also be considered after adoption of the budget this year, either because more information is needed before a decision is made, or because those particular additions would be based on the need for having a clear understanding of the revenue picture. And then finally, category 3 was the category of additions deemed to be most critical and which absolutely needed to be added to the budget now, even though we were trying to be as fiscally austere as possible. And you have in the packet before you a summary of all of the council's additions in these 3 categories. I want to note that in category 3, the reductions identified by the council to the executive recommended budget were slightly less than $800,000 less than the additions, which means that before the budget can be reconciled, we are going to have to trim $800,000 either from additions that were suggested or some other offsetting additions. So as you go through this next 10 days, we ask you to look for those. If you are unable to identify them, then at the end of the process, council staff will identify some options for you to try and facilitate your decision-making on that. And I'll ask Craig Howard to continue with the other categories.
Thank you, Ms. Michelson. We include a chart on Circle 4 of the staff report that summarizes recommendations to date for ARPA funding. As Dr. Stoddard mentioned during this morning's briefing, the Department of Treasury did release the guidance on ARPA funding yesterday. So that is currently being reviewed by the executive branch. But the chart we included in the packet shows both the FY21 and FY22 uses of ARPA funding that have been recommended by the executive as part of, they were assumed into the budget he submitted on March 15th. And that totals about $126 million. And as part of category 1 additions, the committees have added about $35 million in potential uses of ARPA funding to consider after the budget. And this includes both potential use of ARPA funds in FY22 as well as some potential uses in FY23 that the committees recommended that the council consider. The committee's recommended category 2 additions are shown in circles 5 and 6 of the staff report, and those total about $9.2 million. And then the last item that we want to note is that the tracking summary only includes committee actions, so does not yet reflect the $1.4 million in savings the council did approve related to compensation. So that is good, as there are more resources available there. On the other side of the equation, though, there are potential additional expenditures that have been recommended for CIP current revenue. And there'll still be some movement in the current revenue gap, and council staff has been informed by OMB that the number in the staff report will be higher than was listed in the staff report because of changes in expenditures and how something was categorized in an HOC project. But as part of CIP reconciliation, it's possible that some of the current revenue gap may be able to be addressed as part of that process. But if everything cannot fit within available resources, then staff will, of course, work with the council to determine how you'd like to prioritize any potential CIP current revenue adds as compared to operating budget adds if that is needed. And with that is our summary, and I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. President.
Thank you so much, Mr. Howard. Colleagues, any comments, questions? Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you. Could council staff just talk about again, I'm sorry if you said it already, but what would be the conditions under which we would return to funding items in category 2? This would be higher than anticipated income tax receipts, or what do you anticipate would provide for that possibility?
Right, so we will be tracking the county's revenues in terms of income taxes, in terms of any changes happening with property taxes, but also in terms of federal funding, including FEMA, which, as you know, we still continue to have conservative estimates of if by some chance more revenue is provided there, or any inclination that we will have more revenue. And we're hoping we'll have more information either by this summer or fall, but obviously that's not guaranteed. We're going to have to see how things continue to progress.
Okay, so of what you mentioned, a FEMA reimbursement would kind of be more like ARPA funding, where it's a one-time receipt of funding. I think there would be a distinction between, it looks like we have sustainably better finances than we expected, and so we can think about expenses that will be recurring versus more one-time relief funding, or one or two-time relief funding. Am I right?
Absolutely, and that's really critical. So as we see any changes happening, we will be letting you know whether they're one-time or ongoing, and that would indicate what type of use you may have for it, because we would not want you to use one-time funds for an ongoing expenditure.
Okay, so conceptually, it makes more sense to think about the possibility of getting more FEMA reimbursement than we might have expected. Think of that more as ARPA funding or other federal relief funding. At least that's what I'm hearing.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Member Friedson.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you to staff for putting this report together. I think it's really helpful to get a snapshot of where things are. We do the budget kind of piecemeal, and so it's important that we have these opportunities to assess where we are. I did just want to note a couple things and ask a couple questions. The numbers that you have raised here in terms of where we are, this assumes that the council goes along with the county executive's departure on the fiscal policies on pay-go and on reserves. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so that I think that's important to note, because that's a major overarching question that I don't think has been formally determined or resolved. So we just need to make sure that that is put out there and that we address that. And then secondly, I just by my count, we're at about 161 million in commitments for ARPA. So that's 35 million in committee suggestions, which has not gone through the full council, of course, and then the county executive, who's committed, I think about 126 million was the number that Mr. Howard mentioned earlier. I think that's the 121 initially, plus the additional 5 million, which was the Working Families Income Supplement adjustment that seemed like that was undercounted at first, and so that had to be addressed. I'm not sure if that also counts some of the ARPA suggestions for transportation projects that have been sent over, which were suggested as well, which would take that number up. We're only getting $101.7 million this week, in terms of the first tranche. The additional 101.7 million we're not getting until this time next year. At what point are we going to make determinations for how we're going to appropriate those ARPA funds, whether or not we're going to decide to borrow or pre-fund out of reserves or some other mechanism? I mean, before we ultimately approve the budget, we have to make those decisions. At what point will those decisions be made?
Yeah, absolutely. And the last issue you raised in terms of if we want to use something for the second tranche of ARPA funding, when can it be funded, is something executive staff and the county attorney is looking into right now, consistent with the new guidelines we have. We have been assuming that it might be possible to provide some general funding for things that are ongoing initiatives and then have them reimbursed next May, but we don't know that definitively yet. And as soon as we have the answer, we'll be bringing it back to you. The other point I wanted to make is that some of the funding related to transit is actually a separate part of ARPA money, and so not part of the 200.
So that's the regional transit ARPA funding that the Department of Transportation was recommending.
Correct. And so
Okay.
that doesn't count against this.
That's
this
different than the
amount.
204, just under 204 million that the county government is getting.
Exactly. And we will be continuing to provide information to you, because not only is there separate funding for transportation, but there's also separate funding for education. So the amount of money coming to the county in total will be significantly greater. What we're tracking right here as part of these budget decisions is this, or at least in this memo, is the initial, the 200+ million that is coming directly to the county.
Appreciate that. Thanks for the clarification. So is the idea that we're going to do the ARPA, we have to appropriate the ARPA funding as part of the budget process? Are we going to be in a position to finalize, based on the county attorney and the executive branch and council staff review, of how our ARPA funds can be utilized, when we choose to utilize them, and whether or not we would be willing to pre-fund and then ultimately reimburse for them? Will we be doing that before we formally approve the budget? Is that the current thought process?
That is our goal, and we will keep you up to date if anything changes that will not make that happen. As you know, there are some parts that are built right into the budget, so those portions will in fact be approved as part of the budget. It is the use of the money that we won't be getting until later in FY22, where we still have some outstanding questions. And if we can't answer those questions before approval of the budget, it will be immediately after, as soon as we get them.
Are we able to separate out enough of the ARPA funding that's been committed, the 126 million from the county executive, or the 35 million, that could differentiate between what is, effectively baked into the operating budget that we'd approve, and then decisions that we could potentially put off for one-time expenditures outside the budget if we're not in a position to make that decision in the next few weeks? Because we only have 1 week before we're making final budget decisions.
Correct. And there's only the only ones that you are going to be making a decision on as part of this budget is those that are in the FY22 budget that have been identified by the county executive and already reviewed by the committees. So you should be in a good position to deal with those. For FY21, the executive is going to have to send over a separate supplemental as soon as he receives the money. He doesn't have the money in hand. We haven't received the supplemental yet. It is even possible that the supplemental will not come before the end of FY21, although all indications are that it will be. So those will be two separate decisions. And then the third will be the funding identified by the council for additional consideration for use in FY22. And that's where we have those outstanding questions, which we are working hard to resolve as soon as possible.
Okay, so we're able to differentiate out enough of the funds for the operating budget so that it's less than 101.7 million dollars, so that we would have the flexibility to be able to approve a budget even if we didn't have these questions finalized.
Yes, we will make sure that is the case.
Okay, thank you. All right, that's all the questions I have. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, council member. Anyone else? Okay. Ms. Michelson, great answers. Thanks for the memo, Mr. Howard. Thank you as well. And I'm sure we'll be seeing you again soon. Next, we have a work session on the FY22 operating. I'm sorry. First, next we have a work session on the Montgomery County Libraries.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I'm going to turn it over to our lead for libraries, Councilmember Duwando, to walk us through the first item, CIP for libraries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. President. And as always, want to thank our great library team and the staff for preparing the packet, and my colleagues in education and culture. Very straightforward here, just summary. We took one major action that was different from what the county executive had recommended, and we restored funding $159,000 that was a reduction in the recommended CIP for FY22, which is part of the rollout for the Open Plus pilot project. This is a project that's really important. It's a real innovation that has been happening across the world, really, in libraries for the last couple of years, where we're working on extending hours for people to use our libraries when it works for them, without the need for staff, and in controlled setting using technology and scanning cards. And so we have a pilot ready to roll out in Poolesville at Maggie Nightingale this year, but this will allow libraries to expand this project, which I think we agreed on the committee, and I certainly agree that as we reopen, as people look to transition back from the pandemic, find employment, utilize the services that our libraries provide as community hubs, they need to do so in hours that aren't always 9 to 5 or traditional library hours. And so this will allow that flexibility. It also, the library system has talked about, they might be able to use some of this money as well to expand the Wi-Fi that is projected out into the parking lots, which had been used during the pandemic. So it's really important addition. And so we recommended restoring that $159,000, which would give more access to our public in public parts of the library, not the entire library, after library hours. We concurred with on the Noise Library for Young Children renovation to delay that project by 1 year so that they can continue to raise, the Noise Library Foundation, to raise more funding per the memorandum of understanding that they have with us. And we also concurred on switching GO bonds to recordation tax premium for the Maggie Nightingale library costs, and there's no fiscal impact on that change. So those were the three main items, and staff can clean up if I missed anything, but I think I got them. Or Mr. Chairman, yeah.
Ms. Chin, anything to add? Thumbs up. There you have it. So you got a recommendation from the Education and Culture Committee that was 3-0, Mr. President.
Terrific. Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you. Just want to add, we need to get the libraries open too. So look forward to seeing that happen soon, and hope the executive branch, or ask the executive branch, to work out their staffing situation. Certainly need to say that. Thank you.
Thank you.
We certainly all want the libraries open.
Yep. Council Vice President Albornoz.
Thank you. Great work by the committee, and appreciate Councilmember Jawando's leadership on this really important issue. And we kids still tune into the readings, so great job. So the story time. I had one question, and I don't know if staff knows this. How close is the foundation to hitting their goal? What's the delta that we know of right now, Ms. Chen?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Yes, so we actually got somewhat of a rough estimate, but it's been a 25% raise so far in the last 6 or 7 years to fundraise the match in the MOU for the county to continue construction. After this budget, actually, we just requested a meeting with the Noise Foundation to discuss whether timing of the construction, any other fundraising sources that we can source for them, and then also amend anything in the MOU that's needed to move forward. Just to note that the delay in 1 year did not have any fiscal impact to the overall 3-year, 4-year plan of construction. So it's just more of 1 more year, which will give us 12 more months to make sure the project is funded and moves forward.
Thank you very much for that report, Ms. Chen, and I love your background, which absolutely is appropriate when discussing libraries. Just a couple of thoughts on this. I, as you all know, happen to live not very far from this really important amenity and asset in our community. That's a destination spot, not just for residents of Kensington, but for our entire region. because this facility is so special on so many different levels. And I give a lot of credit to this committee and previous council committees and the previous county executive in trying to find a common ground, a sweet spot. And I can speak in the first person about the tremendously good faith efforts of the community to raise funds, which has been challenging. And so as more federal funding becomes available for shovel-ready projects, I would just ask that this be one of those projects under consideration, which in the grand scheme of things is a reasonable amount of money as compared to the overall operating budget. But knowing the many families that have been served and continue to will be served by this really important amenity, I think is important. And so I really appreciate the committee's flexibility in giving them another year, but I also think we need to look more closely at the initial memorandum, which was established years ago in a different time, and see what more we can do to help to meet that delta and get this facility built and renovated. So just putting in a plug. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, and I'll just add briefly, I couldn't agree with you more. I'm glad you brought that up. I think we've all travailed those steps there, and in the library, which is a straight up 90-degree angle. There's a lot that needs to happen, and it is a destination. So I think part of the conversations that Ms. Chen talked about will hopefully allow us to do that. And another plug, like you said, for the American Jobs Act, right? But thanks for bringing that up.
Councilmember Novato.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I want to thank Councilmember Jawanda, lead for libraries, and Chairman Rice. There's no doubt that every year we have very robust committee sessions about the evolving role of libraries. And I think this year in particular, that role needs to be front and center. Oftentimes when we do talk about libraries, it is as if, we're only talking about people that are going in to check out books, which is awesome. But the truth of the matter is that libraries have become real vibrant community hubs of sorts, because people use it to try to have access, obviously, to computers if they're looking for jobs. Our young people also use it a lot to go there and participate in activities, etc. We have had, again, very robust conversations about the design of libraries. I mean, the Wheaton Library Recreation Center combination, I think, serves as an example of how libraries are evolving and how they have become multi-purpose use facilities and assets. And so this, I think, it's one of the reasons why all of us have been so vocal about our desire to make sure that our libraries are open and available to our community, because they will continue to play a very pivotal role as we are emerging from COVID-19. And I hope that the executive will continue to do whatever it is possible in terms of their logistics to open more and more libraries / community assets, so our county can take advantage of that. But I want to thank Ms. Vassallo and the team. They continue to do everything possible. They have farmed out their employees to do other things, but I know they're very excited about getting back and providing those types of services and access to those types of services to the community at large, and we will continue to monitor that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Friedson.
Thanks. I'm glad that both Councilmember Albornoz and Councilmember Navarro have raised both the broader issues in Noyes Library in particular. I just wanted to note and highlight that Councilmember Albornoz, I get to be a constituent of Councilmember Albornoz, and he gets to be a constituent of mine, a unique relationship that the two of us have that unfortunately I don't get to have with any other council member. So appreciate my deference to him as the neighbor in raising that first. I really just wanted to thank the Education Culture Committee, Lead for Libraries, Jawando, for your work on this. I do think this is a key area that we ought to look at. MOU was a long time ago. Those costs go up. It's a lot to ask community advocates to keep up with increases in costs. And so I hope that we can work together in partnership. I know we're going to take some time with the MOU to try to work through some of those challenges, but to make sure that this amenity for our youngest children that so many rely on, not just in that particular community within walking distance, but throughout the county, people come and travel to that library because it offers services and particular activities that no other amenity does, that's unique to the county, and hopefully we can continue to take a look at that. So I just wanted to lift up again what has already been noted. Thank everybody for their work and collaboration on this. I know we're all committed to working through that, and look forward to being able to continue that as we move through this budget and beyond. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Councilmember Jawando, Lead for Libraries, and Chair Rice for your leadership on these issues. Also, echoing the sentiment for Councilmember Albornoz and uplifting the Noyes Library as a very special place in our community and as our region. So I appreciate that. And as others have said, as we are trying to get out of this last year and work through the economic recovery that we know so many people have experienced, or the economic downturn that so many have experienced. These are individuals who have not been able to work from home. Some of them don't have jobs at all, and the libraries are a refuge for them. And so as we begin to reopen, we need to open up our libraries. As we begin to recover, we need to reopen our libraries and provide our residents who most need this online technology so that they can find jobs, so that they can also do some tax filing, especially now that we're going to increase eligibility for various types of tax deductions, thanks to Councilmember Albornoz and Navarro on that, as well as other partners. But these are all resources that our libraries serve those who need it the most. So let's do this for them. Thank you.
Terrific. Okay, I don't see any other requests. After this great discussion, all those in favor of the committee recommendation, please raise your hand. Looks like that's unanimous. Good work, committee. Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'll move on to you with the Public Arts Trust.
Thank you very much. And I really want to acknowledge the great leadership of Susan Jenkins, who heads up the Arts and Humanities Council of Montgomery County. We also have Anita Arieti, who's with OMB. But really want to say just one thing that I highlighted as an example and then turn it over. We had a unanimous committee recommendation of 3-0 to concur with the county executive's recommendation to restore the Public Arts Trust. I was in Denver. I was actually in Colorado picking up my daughter, and we decided to take a small detour on the way to the airport and stop for lunch, and went through Denver and was driving around, and some of the older buildings in some of the areas had these beautiful pieces of art, either on them directly in the form of murals or in front of these buildings. And it really did beautify this area of the city and just showcase how much public art makes a difference. And immediately when I came back, I had the opportunity to mention this to Ms. Jenkins. And I think oftentimes we always just think of public art as a sculpture in front of an office building that you go into. But really don't think about the other ways in which public art truly makes a difference in our communities. And one of the examples that came to light, and I really want to thank Councilmember Glass for his partnership in this line of thinking, but with our new Montgomery County Coalition for the Homeless Shelter that's going to be in Rockville, we've already linked up Ms. Jenkins with Susie Sinclair Smith, who heads up MCCH, and are so excited working together with Greg Assant with our Department of General Services to work together to create a public art project there at our new homeless shelter. They were very concerned about the aesthetics of the building. And of course, because of some of the things that you have to do, it doesn't always lend to having this bright, beautiful building, but that's what art is for. And it really is something where it really does culminate in terms of what it is that we need to do in the future of what public art is going to mean to Montgomery County. And so from that respect, certainly updating the expenditure schedule to the $218,000, which is a net increase of $109,000 on the annual CIP schedule, just makes perfect sense and is exactly in line with what we need to do to continue to lift up our community, to brighten our spaces, to make sure that we're touching people and having them feel the power of art. And so with that, let me turn to Ms. Jenkins if you have any comments as well, and then turn to Ms. Chen, but this is a pretty straightforward recommendation.
I think you're muted, Susan.
Hello, I was just in mute land, which is what we've come to call it. It's wonderful to see all of you council members. And I just want to say that I cannot wait until we are all physically back together again. I miss you. And when I'm seeing you all here, I feel a little verklempt because we've worked so closely together, and I'm deeply appreciative. I really am appreciative too of the vision of this particular council, this idea that the arts and humanities are inextricably woven into our communities. As anyone who is, a maker in the world, we understand that, they're not to be separated. When we're looking towards vibrant communities that attract new businesses, and then those new businesses have to attract their best talent to come and live and work here. Well, Councilmember Glass knows just exactly how that is. I mean, he comes from the vantage point of a journalist and a concerned citizen who has, over the years, been a nonprofit worker. I think he and Councilmember Rice and other council members who understand that we're not just talking about that little extra something, but it is inextricably woven into the community. That's why we're so excited about working with MNC PPC on the Thrive 2050 plan. That's why we continue to make the argument, because it's not just art out there in the world absent of the structure around it that makes community. It is often, as we saw, say, through the Black Lives Matter movement, at the heart of community's voice for what is right in the world for that particular community. There are so many things that I can talk about. I just want to end with a grateful note and one little thing that I will share with you all via email. And that is, several years ago, as I was trying to build the Public Art Trust, I brought in a woman by the name of Dr. Michelle Cohen. And she was my public art consultant for a while. And I couldn't believe that she left us to go to become the curator of the Architect of the United States Capitol. And Dr. Cohen, Michelle Cohen, who I think some of you did meet, she's pretty stupendous. And I'm going to share with you a video that I was just sent from WETA that talks about her work after January 6th in the US Capitol and the art that is in the US Capitol Rotunda that was damaged and harmed by the aerosol, bear spray, all kinds of stuff that happened. So what I'm talking about is part of our cultural history. It's not as an aside. It's not just another thing. It's something that makes community vibrant. It's something that's economic development. It's something that's tied to the keeping of place. It is something that's tied to all of us. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your support.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Jenkins. Let me turn to Ms. Chen. I don't see any comments from my colleagues, but I did just want to give one shout out to Councilmember Navarro. When she was council president, we were reformulating committees. It was her leadership and our conversation together that spawned the Education and Culture Committee, and really has continued to weave in, as you said, Ms. Jenkins, making sure that arts and humanities is a core and integral part of everything that we do. And that certainly happened through that. So really want to give a shout out to Councilmember Navarro for her great visionary leadership there. But Ms. Chen, have we missed anything in terms of framing the committee's 3-0 vote? Excellent. So we have a recommendation before you, Mr. President.
Great. We have a unanimous recommendation from the E&C committee. All those in favor, please raise your hand. That looks like it's everybody. Well done. And finally, we have a recommendation on non-departmental accounts, community grants.
Oh, we got two more. We have Montgomery County Government.
I skipped ahead.
Yes. So Montgomery County Government and Carolyn, I'm sorry, I'm just going to go through these very quickly, but we have a cost sharing where we unanimously voted 3-0 to recommend with our bond bill initiatives with matching state funding between cost sharing There were two projects. One was the Upcounty Nonprofit Hub that's submitted by Family Services in the amount of $400,000, and the Intergenerational Center and Regional Headquarters submitted by Easter Seals at $100,000. And then we have Arts and Humanities Capital Grants and the county executive recommendation to add $750,000 to the FY 23 through 26 expenditure schedule. We voted 3-0 for both of those two items. And that is now before you, Mr. President.
Great. Any questions on that? If not, all those in favor of the committee recommendation, please raise your hand. That is unanimous. Well done.
So we have our last one, Mr. President. I'm going to talk really slow because, you know, we started at 2:40. No, I'm just kidding. We have our last one, which is our non-departmental account for community grants operating budget going to the base budget. And this is just a straightforward NDA. The council staff recommends approval of the NDA. These are the community grants operating budget that was submitted by the county executive. This did not actually have a committee recommendation, so it would require a motion and a second and then approval. Am I correct, Ms. Chen? Is that correct? Yes. So it would require a motion and a second and then vote for the council.
Sounds right to me. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Councilmember Jawanda moves. Anybody want a second?
Second.
Councilmember Navarro seconds. Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I serve in a personal capacity on the Bethesda Green Board. Would just ask as a friendly amendment that the Bethesda Green community grant be separated out so I could abstain on Bethesda Green and could vote in favor of the balance of the item. Thank you.
All
Happy to accept that friendly amendment.
wonderful. The amendment is deemed friendly. Okay. All those in favor of the recommendation on community grants, save the recommendation on Bethesda Green, please raise your hand. That's everybody. Okay, somebody want to make the motion in favor of Bethesda Greens grant?
So moved.
Councilmember Rice?
Second.
Second, Councilmember Reamer. All those in favor of the recommendation on Bethesda Greens grant, please raise your hand. That is 8-0. And any abstentions? Councilmember Friedson. Okay, 8-0-1. Great. Colleagues, good day's work. Got a lot done. See you tomorrow. Special closed session at 9 a.m. Special announcement is in your inbox. Thank you.
Take care, guys. Stay safe.
Good night.